Barry Ritholtz here in the middle of the week, in the middle of June. Plenty to talk about with you. Thank you very much for getting off of your perch, your throne, and financial media and investment and slumming it with me.
Happy to slum it with you, Pete, anytime you like.
I went to Costco today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I've only been there a couple of times.
Is that true?
Yeah, and
They have some good stuff. It's just big portions, big serving size.
what do you think about those types of stores? I had no idea.
So the Costco business model is kind of fascinating. They sell everything pretty much at a break even. They make their money on their annual membership,
Oh,
which is like $89 or 109. I don't even know what it is. I confuse that with Amazon Prime. But that's their gig. And they very famously have been selling these hot dogs and a bun for $1.50. And some junior executive said to the CEO, why don't we raise the price of that? It's been $1.50 for 22 years. And the CEO says, next person who suggests that, I will murder with my bare hands. That's how, they have their gig, they have their value. If you need 4 quarts of tikka masala sauce or a gallon of salsa, it's a great place to go. If you're an empty nester, if it's just you and the wife, well, ain't a whole lot of, I don't know if you need a stack of 200 legal pads and 4,000 pencils, but they got that.
so that was my thought because I live alone now, and I don't think that that's the place for me because I don't need to buy everything in bulk.
Right.
But not the case. You can get you still. I feel like you could still save a lot of money going to those stores, no matter who you are, no matter what your needs are. And I think I proved it today. And I also bought just a few things I probably didn't go into the store for, like a hat.
Well, you need a hat in the sun. It's June.
Yeah,
You don't have natural covering, regardless of whether it's gray or not. You need something to protect that dome.
Thank you for justifying the purchase. I do need that. Okay. Well, I want to talk about about some of your recent posts and everything that's happening. But I gotta just ask you just about where we're at right now with the economy and with trade and with this potential legislation moving through the House, and how much markets have changed in these first 5 months of the year of this Trump presidency, because I'm not following it that closely, but we're all very scared. What is your overview right now?
So, kind of mixed. So Trump was fortunate again to inherit a very robust economy and a very strong market. Nobody really expected the sort of over-the-top, wacky tariffs that he rolled out on April 2nd. I call that a collective failure of imagination. With the benefit of hindsight, hey, didn't this guy run on this? Didn't he put tariffs in last term? Doesn't he call himself Tariff Man? He's been enamored of tariffs his whole adult life. In fact, he had his son Jared go find me an economist who supports tariffs. And there's one guy who's a fourth tier economist at a second tier school. He's the guy that they ended up making the head of, trade policy.
You talking about Nutlicks?
No. Peter Navarro is.
Right. Yeah.
There aren't. We've seen this movie. We know how it ends. We saw it in 1930. I guess reliving the pandemic from 1918 wasn't enough. Now we're going to relive the tariffs, which didn't cause the Great Depression, but it made it much worse. So we know, every economist in the world knows that this is like a giant VAT tax on consumers. And the reason we saw this spasm in the markets are, hey, people only have a finite amount of money. Companies are only going to make a certain amount of profits. And if you're going to add a 10 or a 30 or a 50 or 135% tariff on goods, well, people are going to have that much less money to spend. The companies are going to make that much less profits. Either the economy shrinks or goes into a contraction, the rate of growth slows down or it actually gets smaller, or corporate America just does poorly and we see the stock market come down substantially, hey, that's everybody's retirement, 401k, IRA, kids' college fund, 529. No one wants to see that happen. It happens organically, but no one wants to make that happen. So the initial reaction in April was, holy shit, what's going on here? Eventually, the market kind of sussed out, oh, this guy isn't going to go through with this. The market is undefeated. I did a post showing the history of every time the market plummets 10, 12, 14% in a week, scares the bejesus out of Congress, and they, what do you need? It happened in, the fall of '08, October of '08. Ben Bernanke testified in Congress and said, listen, we're just supposed to keep unemployment low and keep inflation low, and we're not authorized to maintain the financial system and to unfreeze credit. You have to give us the authority if you want us to do that, and we need some money to do that. Congress said no. The market sold off like 13% a week. That was on a Monday. By Friday, Congress said, whatever the hell you want, just make it stop. And then the same thing happened in 2020. There was a debate on renaming a library in D.C., and the Republicans and the Democrats couldn't agree on talking about meaningless nonsense. The old joke, why are academic fights so vicious? Because they're so meaningless. A library in D.C.? Don't we have bigger fish to fry? And then the NBA shut down, and then the world suddenly realized, oh, shit got real. And they immediately passed the biggest fiscal stimulus as a percentage of GDP since World War II, the CARES Act 1.
There were more adults there now, and I'm not asking you to necessarily compare.
I don't know if that's true. I think that people will dabble in the black arts and the nonsense until they get scared enough, and then the adults. So the adult here is Scott Bessent. A week and a half later, I wasn't privy to the conversation, but I like to imagine it when something like this, market like plummets 5%, 5%, 5%, 3 days in a row. And the president measures himself on how well the market is doing. And I just imagine Scott Bessent running into the Oval saying,
yeah,
Mr. President, you got to do something. Otherwise, you will be known as the worst president since Hoover. And so they put a 90-day.
So you think, Scott Bessent and probably a few others. I heard there was reporting that they were trying to do things when like Elon wasn't in the room or Navarro wasn't.
No, it was when Navarro wasn't in the room. They waited till he was all there. Someone asked me what's going to happen the rest of the year, and my answer was, tell me who the last person to whisper into Trump's ear before he makes a decision. If it's Scott Bessent, we're fine. If it's Peter Navarro, well, strap yourself in. We're going to see a bumpy ride.
What was the dumb word he made up? He said, people were getting skitchy, whatever he said, and then he caved, and people in your world gave him a new nickname,
Taco.
Taco. Trump always
chickens out. Yeah.
Is that a thing? Is that now like a rule? Is that now
here's the thing, the market eventually figures everything out. Right? When I know some people almost put like a, mystical religious symbolism on the market. I'm not in that camp. However, if you think about the market as a probability calculating machine that is exercising the collective wisdom of everybody as expressed through their buying and selling, it's more or less kind of pretty good over the long haul. It'll be wrong from Monday to Tuesday to Wednesday, but it's pretty right decade over decade and year over year. There's an old joke. Markets have forecast 9 of the last 3 recessions. So you can't get too hung up on the daily or weekly swings because sometimes they're just noisy. But by and large, the markets have reflected the most efficient allocation of capital to invest in the innovative genius of humanity. I should write marketing copy for the New York Stock Exchange.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
But if you think about it, hey, like NVIDIA's been around forever. It was a chip maker, then it was a chip maker for mobility and games, and then suddenly they cracked the code on AI, and more or less you've been watching that stock rise now for a decade. as more and more people figured out, oh, this AI thing is going to be big. And we've seen that time and time again. Sure, short term, certain stocks get shellacked too much, and sometimes they go high too much. But collectively, it's, mostly more or less sort of eventually efficient. It gets it right, plus or minus.
Let me ask you again, though, about the tariff situation. Today, here are just some headlines, because it seems like a lot of attention is being paid to, as it should be, the deal or no deal or negotiations with China. BBC, Trump claims rare earth deals done with
What
China.
deal? Show me the document. Show me the people agreeing
New
to
York
this.
Times says Trump hails progress with China, but details are sketchy.
Yeah.
CNN, Trump's China truce is nothing of the sort. NBC News, Trump says China tariffs will stay high after 2 days of talks. And finally, Reuters says deal getting U.S.-China trade truce back on track is done, Trump says. So these headlines vary between taking what Trump says and putting them in there and questioning what he says. And
show me the money. Show me the money. That's all. Show me the deal. Show me the paperwork. He's very big on signing the executive orders. Great. We cut a deal with China. Maybe show me the receipts, please. I'd like to just see them.
Yeah.
Because when people tell me stuff, I have learned never take candy from strangers. So
there you go.
Especially someone who has a track record of, how can I say this? Perhaps not always being 100% on the money truthful. Is that a fair statement?
I mean, it's unbelievable. Every day, it's uncanny that he tops himself with a mountain of bullshit that he just keeps piling up.
So when someone says, someone with anybody in that position who has a history of, let's call it, being less than fully forthcoming or saying things that are subsequently demonstrated to not be exactly true, just show me the receipts. Hey, the two biggest superpowers in the world strike a giant economic deal. Do I get a little receipt? Like when you Venmo, I get an email. Yeah. Your sister sent you $27 to pay for dinner last night. I get the Venmo. Show me something. Otherwise, I just have to assume it's more nonsense. The fascinating thing about the market is that the market has figured out pretty quickly that it's all bullshit. The tariffs are bullshit. The deals are bullshit. They just, I'm just going by what's happening.
Yeah.
They are looking at overall what is happening with the data. This year, we've been paying a lot of attention to the soft data, which is what some people call sentiment and surveys. CFOs, how much are you going to spend on CapEx? Families, are you going to Disneyland this year? That sort of stuff. That's turned negative. You can understand why a company might not want to allocate a few $100 million to build a new factory, because I need to have some clarity as to what's this going to cost me? Will I be able to hire people? What's it going to cost to move stuff over the border? I need some information, and I'm just going to wait until the dust settles.
When I think about economics and finance and what role government and political leaders can play at the state level, much less obviously at the national level, we talk a lot about these policies and the roles that government can play, whether it be regulating any kind of industry, much less trade deals, tax policy, and I guess the most typical or historic one is, government investment, passing legislation and investing into community states and projects and so on. But one thing we haven't really seen or talked as much about, and this is just off the cuff, so maybe I'm missing out, I'm no expert, that's for sure, is politicians, government having an effect on the economy by making America unattractive and unsafe, and in another way we haven't really seen, deporting so many people who are specifically contributing to the economy in restaurants, in fields, and at construction sites. Those two things seem somewhat new, and I'm not sure how much they're going to affect the overall economy, but man, it wouldn't be surprising, because if people don't want to come to America because they're worried they're going to get stuck here, next year if the World Cup, he's got this travel ban, all those countries, players and fans aren't going to be able to come. That's money lost. Not to mention if they are worried about going to work because they might get deported. So on the issue of these deportations and just making America less attractive, do you think those things actually make an impact in our economy?
Yeah, no, it definitely does. You can see it in the numbers of travel from the UK, from Canada, from Europe. Broadway ticket sales are more or less okay, but there are some signs that you saw it with Delta and JetBlue. Maybe it was Southwest was the other one that have said that the lack of clarity, the uncertainty about what's going to be what, has led a number of people to cancel travel plans. I mean, think about it. You usually don't book a flight next week. I got travel coming up in August. I already booked the flight. I have travel in September. I'm about to book the flight. But if you're thinking about, hey, maybe we'll come to New York, take in a play, go to some museums, watch those numbers. You're going to start to see those suffer. And it's not just New York City. It's the whole country. Look, America, for better or worse, is a brand. We export our culture, we export our entertainment. People have imitated the leadership that we've demonstrated economically, militarily, politically, and certainly culturally. There's a risk of a black eye and some damage to America, the brand, which affects America, the economy. We're still a global economic leader, and it's not impossible to roll back some of the damage that has been done in the first, 3.5 months, 4 months. But I am starting to elevate concerns that, hey, if this continues, this is going to be really problematic. The odds of an unforced policy error just continue to rise. In the beginning of the year, Torsten Slok, a very savvy economist who works for the Apollo Group, said 0% chance of recession this year. The economy is so strong, the market is doing so well, consumers are flush, corporate America is doing well. I see 0 chance of a recession. And after April 2nd, that rose substantially. Oops, I never expected this sort of mayhem. So now we're looking at, 30, 40, 50% chance of recession, depending on who you speak to. It really depends on what we said earlier. Tell me who the last one to whisper in the president's ear. Yeah. And I could give you pretty decent recession odds.
I mean, lots of analysis depends who you ask, but you look at different organizations when it say that mass deportations is pretty bad for the economy. And so you're talking mostly about the tariffs and so on, or rather, just the tour
and just some of the backlash from the Canadians. Most sovereign nations don't find it amusing that you're saying you should be our 51st state. And that would be great. Just continue guaranteeing us health care and retirement, and we'll have a conversation. By the way, I'm going to bet you that the average Canadian is far to the left of the average American. So you really want to bring in a state that's going to swing the country to the left. By the way, Panama Canal, Greenland, Canada, these are all just nonsensical distractions. Pay attention to what's actually being done. Now that Doge is gone, we're on to the next thing. Like Doge was going to save trillions. It probably cost us a dozen or 2 billion, given all the expenses involved in canceling contracts that were already pre-existing.
What about mass deportations? I mean, housing, construction sector, agriculture. I mean, is there any analysis?
Restaurants, agriculture, construction, home construction, renovation.
Like huge percentages in certain states, obviously. I think Karen Bass said in certain parts of California, 80% or higher of the people in the construction, I think she said 80% were undocumented. I don't think she said they were. Yeah, I mean, like, right.
So the reason this, we were supposedly going after gang members, right? But who's hanging outside of a Home Depot? It's workers looking for a job. A contract comes along and says
they should be offered some kind of pathway to citizenship if they're that ambitious that they're standing outside a Home Depot. Somebody should take them aside and say, "Thanks for coming. Looks like you want to work."
Let me remind you there was a deal on the table until then candidate Trump killed that deal.
Covered it.
So this serves a purpose. I don't agree with the purpose. I don't agree with the strategy, but none of this is by accident. This is all by design.
I mean, I'm waiting to see the doomsday nightmare. It's got to affect certainly small businesses and companies in all these sectors, the service industries, but will it affect an entire industry? Like this guy, Stephen Miller, is pissed that they weren't going to obvious places to find people who were clearly not committing crimes because he thought it would be easier to find people to deport. Do you think entire industries get affected by this? Also, it's not like new people are coming in. They're sending out I don't mean to be too hyperbolic, but it would seem that they are deporting the only people who will do certain jobs.
It's perplexing to me, and I mentioned earlier the collective failure of imagination. Like, it's very hard to logically deduce something that is driven by illogic and emotionality. And I can't figure out, what's the motivation other than xenophobia for deporting people who there was a documentary, A Day Without a Mexican, about, all the crops in the fields can't get picked. And, immigrants come to the country and do the jobs that the native-born Americans don't or won't do. Right? I mean, I waited tables in college. I did bartending and short order chefs. I don't know if college kids today really are enthusiastic about that. They certainly don't want to be a dishwasher. But those are the sort of jobs that tend to go to, not to paint too broadly, but you mentioned construction, renovation.
There is not
food
a
service.
white person.
You left out medical care and elder care.
They're the entire
huge.
They are what were named essential workers. During the pandemic, and to see what's happening, it just I can't imagine thinking. And you said that the only reason for this is xenophobia. Yeah, there's no special interest in lobbying governments at the state or federal level to do this, because every industry loves their cheap labor, every single industry and company. And why aren't they arresting the business owners that are hiring them?
There was a argument a couple of years ago about HB1 visas, and we want more of these people because they help keep wages down for the coders and the tech bros. And now we're kind of going the other direction. I am perplexed as anyone. I recognize the reality. We have rarely been so subject to the whims of a single person.
Yeah.
Although there seems to be some, like we saw in the 2020 election, the court losses continue to pile up. And at a certain point, the options to do a certain approach. I am not a policy analyst. You have a majority in the House and Senate. How have you not? Why is everything executive orders? How have you not introduced your legislation to Congress yet?
Well, that brings us to the legislation that they did pass out of the House. And
that's all right. So that's 1/3 of the process.
And of course, it's in the Senate right now, and who knows what happens. But the argument around the budget deficit and national debt that it blows up is one that obviously Elon Musk and other people are making, serious Republicans in both the House and Senate. And I, tend to believe more the Stephanie Kelton views and modern monetary theory around it. But what I'm seeing, if you go and then you Google treasury bond market and you look at the headlines for that, they're not necessarily great. The U.S. Treasury, by the way, is about to auction off some 30-year bonds. I'm not sure if we should be caring about that or what that matters, but the bond market is potentially freaking out. What's going on there, and how does that relate to this bill, or any other thoughts about this big, bad, beautiful, budget busting, bleach blonde, bombshell bullshit?
So I think generally the initial reaction to the tariffs and just what looked like the destruction of the post-World War II Pax Americana Something which, by the way, has led the United States to be the strongest, most wealthy country in the world. Like the thought that, hey, this guy's throwing that out the window. Maybe we need to bring some capital back home. Let's sell some bonds, which sends rates higher. Let's bring our dollars, our cash in, sell our dollars, get our euros and our yen and our yuan back, and bring our money home because, America, which has been known for its stability and rule of law and sanctity of private property and court system which will enforce property rights and contracts, that seems to kind of be up in the air. And I wrote a piece, I want to say in 2020, how much is the rule of law worth to America? And the answer was somewhere around 25 to 50 trillion dollars.
Yeah.
And that goes out the window, bad things happen. So again, there's one or two adults in the room that run into the Oval and say, Mr. President, Mr. Hoover, you sure you want to do this? And so that kind of keeps him somewhat in check. I don't want to say Uncle Sam has been beaten up, but certainly it feels like Uncle Sam has a black eye. And that's being reflected in, when I talk America, the brand, it's not just, streaming Netflix. It's the totality of the political, economic, and military leadership of the nation. And that's been undercut pretty substantially.
What do you think about inflation right now? I mean, looming inflation data may lock interest rate cut forecast is one headline.
Block or lock?
Rock. Sorry.
Rock. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. We had beaten inflation. Inflation peaked in June 2022. A year later, it was down under 3. 2 years later, it was down in the 2s. We won. It was all over. Until someone says, I'm going to introduce a highly inflationary set of policies that even if it's just a one-time price increase, you're causing prices of goods and services to go up. No companies aren't just going to eat it. You've passed a giant VAT tax on consumers if they stand, and that's inflationary. I wanted the price of eggs down, so many people have said. Well, look at what's happening. Everything we bring in from Canada, from Mexico, from Europe, from Asia. It'll be interesting when, there's a risk that store shelves are going to be out of products. I don't think it'll be like the pandemic, but there's an increasing risk that there are going to be spot shortages unless the policy gets walked back fairly substantially. And again, I don't know what he's going to do. I'm not in the business of predicting the whims of any one single person. If I wanted to predict what a judge would do or what any one person would do, I would have stayed a litigator. I got no interest in that.
Now, today's information on inflation, U.S. inflation rises 0.1% in May from prior month. So
got to annualize that 0.1 times 12.
Okay, but in terms of markets and in terms of forecasts, it's less than expected, and so maybe the damage from Trump's tariffs isn't guaranteed. New York Times CPI shows U.S. inflation remains muted as tariff impact is limited. Axios inflation reports suggest damage from Trump's tariffs isn't guaranteed. So that's today's information on inflation. I guess the most important point is the one you already made. We had it beat.
Right. And the entire tariff issue, we still don't know what's going to happen. Where's this going to go? How far are tariffs going to be? I'm lowering.
Where's he going?
I'm going down because I want to get comfortable for the rest of this conversation.
Oh, I didn't know you were standing. The standing desk.
Yeah, I was standing the whole time.
Bring it down a little more. Bring it down a little more. Your headspace is so much between your Bob Barker hair. That's all right.
So anyway,
do anything.
What tariffs are going to stick? It's the on again, off again, on again, off again nature that makes it so hard to figure out what's really going on here. And so, yes, inflation has come down. Came down 2 years ago. It came down long before the election. You had a bird flu, which was the main reason why the price of eggs were as high as they were. But here we are. So it's always fascinating to see people run on one sort of agenda and then immediately pivot to something else. Although, to be fair, Trump has been talking about deportations. He's been talking about tariffs. He's been talking about all this stuff his whole career. They're just so kind of wacky and, counterindicated and self-destructive that, again, collective failure of imagination. No one thought. You were serious about that? I didn't think you really meant it when you said you wanted to deport 10 million people.
Took him for what he said, but I guess it's hard for smart people to believe that you would kick your own dick every time.
Right. Try not to power staple gun your testicles to your thigh. Like, don't do that. I think we could all agree that's a bad thing, right? And yet, here we are.
I don't think my balls are big enough to reach, but moving on. How about any other markets before I get to one of your latest posts?
The dollar is a big thing. I think that we are underappreciating the value of having the world's reserve currency as the U.S. dollar. It has been called America's exorbitant privilege. I just can't imagine that anybody who understands economics would put our exorbitant privilege at risk. And that's really a big deal.
How worried are you about our
25%? That's where I am. I was at 10%. I was at 10% January 20th. I was at 0% a year ago. So this is a big change.
What about markets, commercial or residential real estate, automobiles? Anything you want to say about them?
I like them. I like cars and I like houses, and we should be making more of both.
Yeah.
Following the financial crisis, we spent over a decade underbuilding houses, and the only reason we got away with that was so many of that generation post-financial crisis were living in their parents' basement, and then the pandemic came along, and suddenly everybody wanted housing. So not only did we underbuild single-family houses, and we have some pretty aggressive NIMBY laws that prevent more home construction. People want to live where the good jobs are, and for the most part, the good jobs are not where there's plenty of open space and not a lot of land to build. I was just in Silicon Valley in San Francisco. Every time I'm there, I'm just astonished at how much more built up it is since the last time I was there. You look at New Jersey. It's one of the wealthiest states in the country. It's also one of the densest. And why is that? Well, you have proximity to New York and proximity to Philadelphia, and a lot of really good jobs are there, and that means the housing stock is really high. Wherever else you see good jobs, home prices are hard. We were just in Chicago, which is a little more reasonably priced in the Midwest than New York or San Francisco. I think because the winters are really tough. You got to be you can't be a wimp. You got to be a tough guy to put up with Chicago winters and the heat of Chicago summers. So maybe that's part of why their rent is a little more modest. But also, they're not an island. They can keep building out, and they have been. And Chicago has always been a great city. It feels very reasonable. But look at D.C., look at Boston, look at San Francisco, look at Los Angeles. A lot of the major business centers in the country are constrained by their housing stock. P.S. I can't remember the last time you could say the fastest growing cities in the United States weren't the coastal areas. They were inland. But that's what's going on there. The Midwest, and this is all post-pandemic elements driven by fiscal stimulus and government policy. The Midwest, look at Nashville, look at Austin, Texas, I can name you a dozen cities. Charlotte, another big.
I don't know. I don't know if this is quite the same, but anywhere north of New York City, all of upstate New York is looking a lot more valuable.
It's still pretty sparsely populated. Something like 2/3 of the population are, in the bottom quarter of the state. But when you look around elsewhere, look at Indianapolis, or I'm just going through all these various cities that have really seen an uptick. The Sun Belt has done really well. Colorado, a lot of the Midwest and just West have done really well. The coastal areas that are so developed, so dense and populated, it's hard. Affordability is an ongoing economic issue. Kansas City. I was just in Kansas City. It's booming.
Yeah. Well, I could talk about that issue for a lot longer, but let me ask you about your latest over at the Big Picture, Ritholtz.com. Never take candy from strangers. It's not your actual latest, but it's a good post to discuss, and it's kind of based on your new book, which we've talked about. But if people haven't bought your new book,
purchased.
Did you hear Mark Wayne, Senator Mark Wayne? What did he say? Where is we? Where is we? He said it twice. And the United States Senator said, where is we on the... Anyway,
We is here. We is here on the Zoom.
Your new book is How Not to Invest. And this piece is titled Never Take Candy from Strangers. I love it. First of all, I thought it said never talk to strangers. And that I would have never platformed that with you. Because I think that was the wrong thing to teach kids growing up.
Take candy. Talk to people, but don't take candy from them.
Let me read it. Can I read a little bit of it?
Sure. Knock yourself out.
You write, before you accept the investing advice from a random stranger, ask yourself if they're concerned with your comfortable retirement, buying a new house, or paying for your kids' college. If they don't know your zip code or tax bracket, how on earth can their advice be geared to your specific circumstances? Of course it's not. It's selling something, be it advertisements, investment products, newsletters, or God knows what else. Most of what you hear and read was not written with you in mind. It was created to sell a product. This blog post, as an example, is exhorting you to buy my book. These sales pitches are not nefarious, but they become so ubiquitous that we often overlook them. It's not realistic to suggest people tune out everything. However, I am making 3 suggestions for all consumers of financial content. Understand what media you are consuming. Make intelligent, well-informed choices. Prioritize quality over quantity. There you go.
You're really out on a ledge with that sort of radical idea of just make fewer mistakes and be less stupid. It's kind of right there. So if you don't know, look, there's 24/7 media. There's endless newspapers, magazines, radio, television, internet, Substacks, beehives, weblogs, to say nothing of the fire hose of bullshit on social media.
Yeah,
just ask yourself some questions before you listen to some rando on TikTok. Hey, who is this guy or girl? What is their track record? Have they lived through a few cycles? Do they have a process that is rational and defendable? Do they have the right temperament, or do they run around with their hair on fire? Are they a snowflake that every twitch in the market sends them running off screaming? No one's going to get it perfect, but you want someone who's at least more right than wrong, and that there's some thought behind what they're saying. It's not just clickbait. I saw something the other day. You know, you can turn $100 into $1 million following my strategy. All you have to do is just make 1% a day. I'm like, wait a second. The market returns 8, 9, 10% a year, and those are the best managers in history. Wait, you think you're going to get 1% a day for 255 days in a row? Like, stop and think about how absurd that is on its face, and yet it's so seductive that it catches people. I love, in the book, I talk about the guy who says, if you're in international waters on April 15th, you don't owe any taxes. And there have been so much of this crazy crank nonsense that the IRS had to put out like a 47-point bulletin. Here's all the bullshit that people are saying that are not true. If you follow this tax advice, we will come find you, take your money, charge you interest and penalties. This will not work out for you. And yet there's just very, very few people. I love the TikTok investors, where this person picks out a random TikTok or Insta for that day and just reveals it in all its glory as just pure, unadulterated nonsense that it is.
Oh, I want to see that. I never done
TikTok investors, just one of my favorite follows.
Oh, good. That's on TikTok, I'm guessing.
On Twitter, on X, whatever we call it. Right. For whatever is left of Twitter, TikTok investors, and I think he's on Blue Sky as well.
Where are you? now. The podcast, the blog. Are you on any? Do you post regularly on any of the?
So I will occasionally throw something up on LinkedIn. You're actually reminding me. I'll put the "Never Take Candy from Strangers" post up on LinkedIn. I think generally speaking, I like to have control over my content. Talk to people who produce a lot of YouTube videos and how frustrating it is every time they change the algorithm. I'm not a giant fan of the various email things, the Substacks, the Beehives. It's
Beehive.
this is clearly a generational thing. Like people my age, the Gen Xers and Boomers, and I kind of have a foot in both camp. We like to go to a website and read stuff. I don't need you annoying me with email. Hey, read this. I know where you live. I can find you.
I know it's
Right? And then you talk to like millennials and Gen Zs. It's like, I don't need to go to a website. Just send me the shit I'm going to read.
Well,
and if I don't like it, I delete it. It's like there's such a generational divide.
I actually wonder generationally how much people read at all. Like,
Well, there's a couple of big concerns. There was an article, I don't remember if it was the Washington Post or the Atlantic, that was it Gen Z, Gen X, one of the gens doesn't like reading stories to their children, and it turns out that people just read much less than they used to.
yeah, my weird thing is, I'm a sucker for a audio app, the New Yorker, Washington Post, New York Times, any podcast, because I sit enough with my work all day that I don't want to sit more and read more, but I want all of that content in my brain. So I'm, when I'm running or when I'm, outside just doing stuff, I like to, or just cleaning around my house. I do a lot of cleaning in my house, believe it or not.
Here, I look at my mess. I need some help here.
I'll listen to an article often, but
Right.
I don't know.
I find I process stuff differently when I see it. Like I'm
Yeah,
a visual
right.
processor, so
It's
I want to
important.
read
Sure,
it.
I agree, but it's like sometimes I sit so much. I just don't want to sit more. The only time I want to read is if I'm lying down in bed, and even then, I'm scrolling.
Like we have a routine depending on the week. I will, especially on weekends. I mean, to me, I love sitting on the beach, cracking open a book.
Yeah.
Waves in the background. We find like a quiet little place away from the crowd. I'm thrilled to death with that.
Even with your attention stuff, you can sit. How long can you sit and read? How many pages or how many chapters could you like? What's the longest before you look at your phone?
If I like the book, Ready Player One, I read that on a plane from start to finish, like, straight through.
Didn't look at your phone.
Not once.
Oh.
And I remember there's a book I really enjoy, How to Invent Everything. I think Ryan North is the author. The conceit of the book is they're a time travel company, but sometimes time machines break down. By the way, time is linear. You can only go back as far as time has progressed. You can't go forward to time that has not unfolded yet. Hold that aside. And because we know that sometimes time machines break down and we can't always just send a time machine back to get you because things move around and what have you, here's a survival guide, and it'll teach you how to invent everything that's ever been invented. And it's fascinating because the book kind of reveals how all these things that we invented, like the modern world, you're building electronics and then semiconductors and then chips before, I don't know, let's call it 1900. Just about any invention that there was could have been invented 1,000 years earlier. People just had to stop and think, hey, listen, glass blowing really became big, I want to say the 12th century, the 13th century, whenever it was. We've had sand and fire for thousands of years. Someone just had to figure it out. But it's a charming book, and the one I'm really looking forward to reading this summer is the new Chernow biography of Mark Twain. I'm a big Twain fan, and it's a little bit of a tome, but I'm excited.
Chernow wrote the
Hamilton,
the biography also of Grant, which was, I think, Ulysses Grant. He wrote an updated, I believe. Isn't that right? Yeah.
I'll take your word for it. Hold on.
That's cool. I love his stuff.
Yeah, me too.
Grant, Ron Chernow. Yeah.
Mark Twain, Grant, Washington, Hamilton. Yeah, he's
Who would
done
you
some.
rather? Who would you rather talk to, Mark Chernow or Walter Isaacson?
Oh, well, Chernow in a heartbeat
Yeah,
because
they both do biographies. That's why I'm saying.
no, I read Isaacson's Steve Jobs biography, and I'm a Mac head for a long time. And as a Mac head, I could tell you it was pretty awful. Like it was just, it missed a lot of really big things. He didn't capture him. So I have his Da Vinci, and I was really excited to read that. In my book, I talk about Gelman amnesia, which was something that Michael Crichton kind of shared with the world. Gelman amnesia is in a situation where you open up a newspaper and you read a story about a subject that you are an expert in, you know intimately, or an event, you were there, and the story is just completely wrong. Oh, they didn't see this, they missed that, they don't understand this. This is terrible reporting. This is totally inaccurate. And then you turn the page and you read something about here's what's going on in Israel and Gaza, and here's what's going on in Ukraine, and you just assume that that's right, despite evidence that, hey, they got the shit really wrong.
Gelman amnesia.
Gelman amnesia. And so when somebody kind of blows it with me, I'm looking for reasons to eliminate people. Yeah. Listen, Andrew Sullivan, brilliant writer, excellent prose, excellent writer, shit the bed on the U.S. invasion of Iraq.
Yeah.
Couldn't have been more wrong. And listen, everybody's entitled to whiff. I get stuff wrong all the time. I put mea culpas up when I was at doing the Washington Post column once a year. I'm like, here's what I got wrong and here's what I learned from it. But when you double and triple and quadruple down or just so totally shit the bed, hey, other people are welcome to read you. I'm not calling for boycotts. I just do it. I call it information hygiene. Once you demonstrate that you're unworthy, I'm kind of done with you.
Yep. You're damaged. It's credibility and your brand is damaged. The Gelman amnesia effect is a cognitive bias describing the tendency of individuals to critically assess media reports in a domain they are knowledgeable about, yet continue to trust reporting in other areas despite recognizing similar potential inaccuracy.
Exactly. And the takeaway, my takeaway isn't, it's not totally turn off media. It's not don't believe anybody. Don't become a curmudgeon. It's don't take candy from strangers.
Yeah.
If you know somebody, someone said to me, hey, your guys do a lot of podcasts and are on CNBC, Bloomberg, Fox, CNN. Should we not take candy from them? And it's like, no, you need to figure out for yourself, right? I know my guys and I trust my guys because I know their process and their track record. But don't substitute my judgment for your own. Pick somebody you find interesting. Like, I'll give you an example. Sam Rowe writes about market structure, right? He's been writing about markets for 15, 20 years. He's this kind of chill dude. He never gets too crazy when everything hits the fan. He has a solid process. He's been a whole lot more right than wrong. Like for me, if I want to learn about what's going on in the internals of the market, what's going on with the structure of the capital markets, Sam Rowe is a guy I know I can rely on. Now, I'm not telling you go rely on Sam Rowe. I'm telling you, like Jonathan Miller and Bill McBride are my go-to guys in real estate. I have these people I listen to about muni bonds, and here are the folks that I know they have a good track record analyzing hedge fund data. But everybody has to not just be so gullible and naive and just assume everything is right. You need to find a team of people. You don't have to hire them. Just subscribe to them and pay attention to what they say. Eliminate Sturgeon's Law. 90% of everything is crap. Eliminate 90% of the junk that's not worthy of your time and pay attention to that top decile that has earned your trust.
But maintain a critical approach to consumption of all media, including the media produced by people that have established trust and credibility. You always have to try to, you don't have to be a contrarian. You don't have to look for something wrong, but you have to be consistently skeptical.
Don't be gullible. When I was younger in my early days on Wall Street, every slick, smooth-talking salesman, every quarterly call, whatever a CEO said, I believed all of this, and most of it turned out to be bullshit. And it was expensive tuition. You learn the hard way. And at a certain point, if you're shopping for a mortgage and somebody tells you this is the greatest rate you're going to get, well, look at a few more websites, make a few more phone calls, and find out if that's really a good mortgage rate. Like, what's the salesperson going to say? Oh, our mortgage rates are 50 basis points too high. You could do better around the corner. No, this is, it's the same thing when you're shopping. I wish we put as much thought and time into our consumption of news, information, and media as we do in buying a refrigerator or planning a vacation. There's a tendency for us not to pay attention to.
You know what I do? I take a shortcut on those big purchases. I learned this when I was a young man. My uncle would always research. He's very wealthy, but very cheap. He would research the hell out of something. And so I'd either ask him to do it for me, or more likely nowadays, like, I know somebody that's like that. Like, somebody on Facebook says, just bought a new fridge. I'm like, did you do all the research? He's like, yeah. I'm like, all right, just tell me which one to buy. Just bought a new camera. I did all the research. I did hours of YouTube and whatever. Which one did you get? All right, I'll get that one. The only thing you don't want to do that on is a mattress. Don't ask anybody for their advice on a mattress, because that'd be very more divisive than abortion.
Again, so you're asking your uncle, you're asking a friend, you know their track record. Oh, this guy goes down the rabbit hole.
He does his work. I know he compares.
So you're doing exactly what you're not taking candy from a stranger.
Yeah.
You're accepting advice from someone who you know has developed a bit of an expertise in that space.
Yeah.
And, we very often feel that we're not qualified to evaluate this. So the default setting can't be, I'm just going to believe, let me turn on the TV and whatever pours out of it, I'm just going to assume is true. You cannot assume it's all false. You just have to be a little selective and basically make intelligent, well-informed decisions. Again, I feel like I'm out on a limb with this wild-eyed, radical concept. Can we all be a little less stupid? That's all I'm asking for.
Oh, speaking of which, I should have played this clip. I got to figure out how to play clips in this. But today, the Treasury Secretary was asked about, does the big, beautiful bill create budget deficits? And he tried to give a bullshit
answer.
Well, eventually the smart, I think it was a senator, asked him, did the Bush tax cuts create deficits?
Oh, yes, those created jobs.
And he wouldn't answer, but it was such a great question because it goes along the lines of kind of what you're saying here a little bit in terms of critical thinking. Like, when we've done this in the past, how did it work? What happened in the past when you cut taxes without cutting spending at the equivalent rates? Well, it's supposed to grow the tax base, and you have so many more receipts coming in. But that's been a lie, a zombie lie, I think, as your friend Paul Krugman would call it.
Yes, that's correct. That was fun doing his podcast. I started hearing from people I haven't heard from in years.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's always
like
I know your followers and they know me, but his followers don't necessarily know me. So it was always interesting. Like, dude, I had no idea you knew. I know a bunch of cool people. It's that's the fun part of working in New York City is you meet all these people. It's really cool.
He was at your book launch.
Yes,
and he was dressed like such a schlub. I wanted to say to him, I'm like, you're Paul Krugman, slopola.
He's such a pussycat. People think of him. People know him from his writings, and they think he's this fierce firebrand, and he's really just.
I wanted so badly to talk to him, but why
didn't you?
One of your sycophants wouldn't leave him alone.
Who was it?
I forget. A bald white guy. They were all bald white guys. There's so many.
Dude, you're a bald white guy.
Yeah, that's why I didn't stick out in any way. I felt like just being in a finance room. I was like, wow.
But you have a beard. He has a beard. That's. Hey, so what do you do to maintain your beard? That's a great.
I don't.
Krugman opening line.
From you on how to get in. I just needed that fucking guy to shut the fuck up. I don't know who you could.
Listen, at a cocktail party like that where there are some notables, and there were quite a few notables roaming around, you give someone 2 minutes, and then it's like,
no doubt. I'm telling you.
Do you remember the Chappelle? Wrap It Up, the device from the Chappelle show. Oh my God, it's such a hilarious.
I'm sure you're going to explain it to me live.
Nope, just you could Google it. I'm not going to explain it to you.
Thank you. Nothing worse. I just got together with a bunch of my buddies from high school, and I stopped a few. You got to stop people when they start explaining a scene. That's fine if you're good at it, and it's the olden days. Now you can tell me about that episode or scene. I'll watch it.
Text me a link. I'm good. Just text me a link.
Just show me on your phone right now. Just shut up and show me on your phone. It's a Steve Martin bit. Show me Steve Martin doing it, dummy.
Right.
All right. Thank you, Ritholtz. Always great. Really appreciate you joining me.
Thank you, Pete, as always.
And thank you, everybody, for stopping by. I'm